thank you guys. I'm meeting some of you for the first time. And those of you that are here for the first time, Wednesdays is more of like, hey, let's come and learn, kind of like a workshop type of session, but we want to make it very interactive as well, right? So my name is Regina Batista, an enterprise agile coach, been in the industry for a couple of years. Nelu, if you can go to the next slide, please, and help me out here. So we've had a lot of great conversations in the last couple of meetups. As you guys know, we put a survey out there because we want to learn what topics you guys are interested in, right? Because we can kind of talk about a lot of different stuff, but one of the topics that came out a couple of weeks ago in our surveys was about, hey, let's talk about the backlog. Let's talk about writing features, epics, user stories, and a little bit about, you know, how do we address business outcomes, right, in our backlog, and how do we get better at doing that? Please know that these sessions also give you 1 PDU and 1 SEU and CEUs for those of you that have your certifications. So don't forget to log that. Okay, next slide. All right, that's a little bit about me, and I think Nelu kind of said it all. And in the next slide is a little bit more of my personal background. My mom is my hero. She's passed away already. But you know, I always remember her fondly. She's a great role model for me, very hardworking. My background, born and raised in Miami, but my family's from Cuba, Cuban immigrants. So, you know, a lot of us know the stories of Cubans that came over and migrated here in the late 60s, early 70s. I was part of that generation. So very grateful to be able to have the opportunity, just learn and grow and have that continuous improvement mindset. I love to travel. That is my passion. If I could be traveling for a living, I would. And then that's part of my family that's there. As you guys can see, Rick Reguera is here. And so we're excited. We're excited to be here. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start out with a poll. And we do this so that we can sort of learn a little bit more about you. So Neilu is going to help me out with the first question. And we're going to go to the slide that we're going to have like a question here for you. And we're going to put the link on the chat. You guys could either do it with your phones or you can do it with your computer. If you guys don't mind. Let's see, Neilu, walk us through this.
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. So I shared the link on the chat. So, and we have the first question: what motivates you to attend meetups?
And this is where we get to learn a little bit about you, right? Please go ahead and click on the chat, on the link. But if anybody wants to share, let's open up the room. Welcome, Jenny. I see Jenny's here. Hi, Jenny.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was on mute.
No worries.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Anybody? So if you guys could please fill this out, that'd be awesome. But if anybody wants to open up the floor and tell us what motivates you to come, you know, it's after work, it's after hours, right? You know, you're taking from your own time to come and meet, you know, with an agile community, a community of professionals like yourselves. What motivates you to be here?
All right, we have several answers here.
Great family atmosphere. Thank you. We are a family and we're welcoming you guys into our family. So thank you for joining us, making connections, learning, share with the community, pick up ideas, community learning. Let's see, scroll down a little bit. Learn about agile coaching, connecting and growing. Does anybody have any great stories about participating in these meetups and what they've learned and what has been some of your best takeaways?
I can share.
Hey, Grace.
So one of the great takeaways I get when attending meetups learning is especially sharing ideas. People think differently and people have different things to add to what you think you already have. So just listening to people's perspective on different things is a great addition for me. That's what I enjoy most, and it's a very relaxed environment. So I'm always getting out with something. I'm always learning something new, even if
Awesome.
it's minute. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else?
If I could add, even when it's not necessarily learning, one of the things I say to the team that I work with is that oftentimes when we might come into organizations and meet resistance, you have to find ways to pour back into you about why you love what it is that you do. And I think coming into meetups takes you out of that vacuum and just allows you to connect with the community again, to remind you, yeah, I do love my job. I love what I do. And so that you can come back in and do it all over again. The last 2 weeks have made me question, do I still want to stay on this journey? So it is a way to pour back into you and to have a personal coach so that you can feel rejuvenated and get back out there again.
I love it. No, that's awesome. I have a lot of friends, that go through a lot of different job changes, and sometimes we're so stressed out with our day to day, right? And we're so bogged down that we don't have time to step out and see and hear from other people and what else they're doing, and people that might be going through similar issues that we have, right? Or similar questions. So I'm glad that you guys are taking the time. Okay, great job, guys. It's important that we understand that, right? For me at least, I'm also a trainer, so I always like to hear from my students. So this is more informal. It's not as formal as a training, so it's great to learn that. The next question is, because we're going to be getting a little technical in our conversations today, what are the agile frameworks that your organizations currently use? And you've got a couple of different options there. And maybe you're using more than one, so that's great. So please, I don't think we're limited to one.
I'm not currently on a team right now, so I entered as other. I might be skewing your statistics slightly. Just want to put that out there.
That's fine. That's good. That's good. So you're not on an agile team. What's your role, Kara?
I'm a Scrum Master. So I was a Scrum Master for the school district that I worked with, and now I'm looking to transfer into the tech sphere. So I'm between projects.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good. But you've got some Scrum Master experience.
Mhm.
Wonderful.
I can't choose more than one.
Yeah, you can pick more than one. Okay, great. So we got a little bit of Scrum.
No, I
We
think
got a
she
lot
was
of Scrum.
saying- No, I think she was saying that you can only pick one at a time. I don't think you can pick more than one. I wasn't able to pick more than one.
They know
Yeah.
it doesn't let you pick more than one, right?
No,
Yeah.
Only one.
it's multiple choice, but just one. Yeah.
Okay,
Ah,
no worries,
okay.
no worries. I see Vicky. Hi, Vicky. Victoria's here. All right, but we've got folks that are in organizations that are using Scrum, Kanban, Safe, Scrum at Scale, and then other. And I think we got Safe twice, but
Hi,
no.
Regina. Sorry to interrupt you, but we also use a hybrid approach where I'm a Scrum Master and a Waterfall project manager.
Yes.
So we kind of follow that.
Okay, that's perfect. But and then you're working with some agile teams.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, same for me, as you know,
Yeah.
Virginia.
No,
I'm in
and
a traditional environment, working in an agile space.
that's fine. I know a lot of Scrum Masters because we report to some PMO organizations. We still have a lot of agile we have a lot of project management responsibilities, especially on the financial side, right? Those are things that have not gone away. And some of the
Yes, ma'am.
reporting capabilities. That's just the reality of it, right?
Right.
But we're still agile and we're trying to get more agile, right? And trying to help organizations get more agile. Hopefully, right? That's the recommendation. So okay, good. Very good. Great. And the next question is, what tools are your organizations currently using to manage the backlogs of the agile teams? Or just backlogs overall? And I think this one you can actually write it down. Okay, Jira. That's one of the most popular ones. Azure, DevOps. Okay. Jira, Azure. I haven't personally used Azure. Mostly Jira, but that's good to see.
I'm seeing a lot of mixture, which is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Hmm.
I think Delu, that was the last poll question, right? Or do we have one more? The other one was for the end, correct?
Well, there's
Okay.
Yes,
something I
correct.
don't see
Yes,
very
correct.
often.
All right. So I think we're going to jump into the Jamboard. All right. So we're using a lot of different tools today. I hope you guys are cool. You guys have done a great job with Poll Everywhere. If any of you are familiar with Jamboard, it's one of the simplest whiteboards that are out there. It's Google based. We're also going to put the Jamboard on the chat. And I wanted to start out the conversation. It's a pretty broad question, right? But at least it will give me a sense as to where you guys are at regarding the backlog. And I said, let me come up with this a little bit more of a generic question, and then we'll do more of a deep dive. So what type of questions, if you guys go to the chat and you've got access to the Jamboard, on the left-hand side, make sure that you guys have the toolbar where you could see the little sticky note, and you kind of click on the little sticky note and you drag it and you bring it in. Okay, let me know if you guys are in it, if some of you are getting in. What type of questions do you have regarding how we can have, I use two words, a good prioritized healthy backlog? What type of questions do you guys have regarding how can we ensure that our teams have a good prioritized healthy backlog, I guess. I hope those are good enough of a high level description there. If some of you cannot access the Jamboard, feel free to put your question on the chat, and then Nilu can help us add it as stickies. Okay, we're going to give this maybe 2 more minutes. Okay, so we got a couple of good questions here. That kind of gives me a sense to see where your mind is at, right? And what are some of the things that you guys want to walk away from? I can highlight some of what's in the topics that I'm going to review, but I see some low-hanging fruit here that might be like a quick answer, if you guys don't mind. Somebody said, how big is too big of a backlog? Who asked that question?
Repeat that.
Who asked that question? Don't be shy.
I'm not admitting anything.
Oh, Marcelo, that's not fair.
I'm not admitting anything.
Did you put that
Yeah,
I'm not admitting anything.
one? He did. All
I
right.
even got it with his
I got
head. His voice.
the agile coach putting me on the spot, right?
Yeah,
got
forever
the
the coach. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm not admitting anything.
That is so not fair. But maybe other people have that same question. So what would Regina say? Okay. I would say typically, and there's no 100% right answer. Typically, prioritize healthy backlog. A healthy backlog should have at least 2 to 3 sprints of draft. I'm going to call it draft user stories. Okay, at least, because we want to look ahead. You want your teams to be looking ahead. Like, how far ahead do you want your teams to be looking? We don't want to be looking out a whole year out, right? That's what these high-level roadmaps are for. We're at the agile team level, right? But you want your agile teams to kind of know what's coming. So you want a good product owner to provide enough of, hey, here's a heads up, here's what's coming. Maybe start doing a little bit of some solutioning of the scope of work that's coming down the pipeline, at least 2 to 3 sprints. Some teams have more, that would be amazing, right? But at a minimum, obviously, if you're a brand new team, you might be doing sprint to sprint, and that's okay because you're a brand new sprint. You have a new initiative. You're understanding the scope of work, right? And it takes time to build that. That's been my recommendation, my experience when I work with agile teams. So anybody, I don't know, Marcelo, how did I do on that one? That one came from you. Is that okay? All right, awesome. I thought that was a quick win. That's a quick one. Let's see.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
So, or maybe I didn't understand the question quite well. I have a new question maybe around on top of this question, that how big, when do we call a backlog is too big, or what we can do about it if it's too big?
The backlog or the user stories?
Okay, so when we talk about this backlog, we talk about the product backlog, like we have in the backlog, and we have all the stories there sitting there for, like in my company, I mean, we have a backlog where we have like 300 plus stories. Wow. And most of them are like 2-year-old, because during our discussion with the client, something came up and we just created a story and we never worked on it because of the other priorities. So it's just sitting there so that we don't lose track of it.
Okay.
But so we cannot just delete it from the backlog, but it has to be there. But it's not the right time right now to work on it. So we have hundreds of stories which are like 2 years old right now. So what do you do about that?
Yeah, in your case, it's the opposite. Right? So I guess the question would be like, how often does your organization prioritize? Like, whoever is responsible for prioritizing, whether it's a product owner or somebody else in a different title role, how often does your organization prioritize?
We prioritize, and we did in fact one kind of a marathon on where we had a couple of back-to-back sessions with the clients to prioritize. But again, we have like hundreds of stories we are talking about here, and we have only a small team to work on it. And so we are on a kind of it's kind of a bandwidth about that. Like, I mean, there's no, even though we know that those are, and most of them are not like critical tickets. I mean, most of them are like low priority tickets, but just because they're low priority, we still have to keep them in the backlog. Somewhere we have to document them so that whenever we have time, we can pick those low hanging fruit and work on them.
No,
So
I know of a lot of teams that keep a separate backlog for their technical debt, but that's a little different, right? If you're actually talking about scope of work, it's a company's decision. But I guess the most important thing is, how do you have a conversation about what's the most important thing right now? What is bringing the most value to your customers right now, right? And I'm assuming that is what is being delivered at the moment. Is that correct?
right, yes, that's what we're working on. And other things are getting sidelined because of the higher priorities. And in between, we getting the tech debt items as well, which are even utmost priority. Even they kind of trump even the business priorities at times, where we had to move some of our servers migration, or we had to move even from Jira to ADO servers and all. So those kind of things are taking precedence over even business requirements, which are even high priorities. So, and because of all these things over the period, we now have such a big backlog, which we can do nothing about until we hire like 100, like at least double or triple the team.
Yeah,
And which doesn't make sense to them, because those tickets are really not important for business. I mean, it's not going to give them any value if we work on today. So
it's definitely a leadership conversation, right? Like, is this stuff that even matters anymore? You know, should you guys start fresh or just start from a certain point forward? But it's definitely an exercise of people having to go in there and reviewing what you currently have and saying, hey, let's rank these from a scale from 1 to 5. Yeah, what's important and what's not, and then start cleaning that up. I don't have the right answer for that one.
Yeah, I mean, my question was basically, I mean, is it against agile or any of these best practices to not have such a big backlog, or it's okay to have that backlog of that size?
I'm gonna ask the coaches to kind of help out with this one. I honestly, it's always like we don't have enough user stories, we don't have enough work. This one's actually the opposite, you know?
Right.
I'm just curious how much time is spent,
Yeah.
right? So you got to realize, okay, these things that are low priority, they're 2 years down the line. And if you have your product owner or team members spending a lot of time on it, that is a pain point that needs to be looked at. Maybe you say, you know, the things that are here, we spent 90% of the time because it's happening right now, right? Current, you know, while these things we're going to spend maybe, you know, 4% of the time. And then these things over here, maybe 1 or 0.001, but you have to be careful because you're going to get yourself in a major hole. And like you said, some things are not even valid anymore. Year passed by and you spent all this time. I've had people or companies, they said, okay, great. We have this long backlog. Let's get rid of the ones that are 2 years and over. Like, I don't even want to look at it, because if it was that important, they would bring it up again. You know, and I've seen companies do that. But it's interesting how I said, let's say no, but that's not something easy to do.
I know.
Like most companies, you can't just say no. You say, yes, we'll put that's something to think about, and we'll put it in our back. That's an easy way to get out of their you know, their focus point. But is it really going to be looked at? Are you really going to put enough time into it? It's a tough call.
So some companies have a practice, right? Like, let's say you're in your backlog, and now we're going to talk about epics. Epics, if you guys are familiar with what the epics are, right? Most of you that are using Jira, you have an epic ticket. There should be a status on that epic, right? So if an epic is in to do, it's to do. You start working the user stories, it goes into in progress. You finish all the user stories of that epic, you move it to done. But there are other statuses of that epic being blocked or that epic being canceled. There's other statuses that you can actually put on those epics, and there's some epics that are closed. Why? Because that body of work was deprioritized and it's no longer relevant. So those are some of the things that you want to add into your system, that way you have other statuses that allow you to make some quick decision making. Hey, let's archive this, let's get rid of this. Those are just some recommendations, but that's an exercise that you guys have to review. But that's why we're agile too, right? So that we are able to talk about MVP. Hey, if there's a change in the market, immediately that we can bring it in, right? And focus on what's the most important for our customers. Because like Rick was saying, those things may not be relevant anymore because it's no longer providing any value. So it's a value conversation. But we know that's a leadership conversation that needs to be had. I hope we answered a little bit of the question, Mayan.
Yes, you did. And what the other gentleman said about actually during our this review exercise of that big backlog, we actually were able to reduced that down to from 400 plus to 200 plus, actually, those stories. Like, as there were like two years old stories, which somehow we already got, they were no longer relevant, actually. And some of them already got closed or completed with the other stories, actually. And so yeah, so we had a lot of those such stories which we did during our backlog cleanup, but we still have a pretty big backlog, and I don't think there is any other way to do it, or we can do anything about it. So as long as, yeah, it's really not against agile principles or anything, I think we are good.
Awesome. I think that addresses the sticky that says, are those PBIs still relevant, right? Which is the product backlog increments. So we can move that one to Don Nelu on the Jamboard. The other quick win that I see, so when to split stories that are too large, I'm actually going to talk about that in some of my slides. So I'm not going to address that one down because I have some good material on that one. But a quick one is, when is the best time for refining? Typically there's the meeting that you guys are familiar called product backlog refinement, right? That is a recommended Scrum session that happens within the Scrum teams. Most of you are familiar with that. Especially if you're a brand new team that is coming together, we recommend it for at least once a week for a 1 hour time box, okay? Some brand new teams need more than 1 hour a week, but typically refinement is a good practice, because if you do really good backlog refinement, guess what that impacts? It impacts your sprint planning. And you do a much better sprint planning if the teams together take the time to refine that backlog before sprint planning. So you start your sprint planning and then somehow schedule within your sprint once a week, 1 hour, to refine the backlog for your next sprint. So that way, when you get to sprint planning for your next sprint, you've already started some of that work. Make sense? Exactly. My sprint planning is a breeze due to refinement. That's what Cheryl said, right? It's a really good practice. And I know a lot of teams that skip it, and it really hurts. It adds more time to your sprint planning. So that's a good recommendation. Okay. I hope that helps, guys. Okay, so did I have another question on the Jamboard, or can we move to the let's move to, I think I have another slide, Nelu. I have another exercise. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the backlog, right? And because we have a lot of people in these sessions from different backgrounds, I want to talk a little bit about what goes into a backlog. But we've got people that are in organizations that have traditional project management. That's why I was asking, what frameworks are you guys working with in your organizations? The majority of folks work with Scrum, but there are also some scaling frameworks out there, such as SAFe, that have a different terminology. So I kind of wanted to do a very high-level overview, right, of what we call the pieces of work that we put into the backlog, right? And it all depends. I was like, we always say, hey, how do we organize the work in our backlog? It depends. So traditional project management, I used to be a project manager with my PMP. You know, we got assigned a project, right? We typically used, and I was also a business analyst. I used to do what we call, you decompose the project into high-level requirements, and those high-level requirements are decomposed into detailed requirements, and then we do the tasks. And we used to do these big, giant project plans, right? So that was the terminology that we used to use when we used to decompose our projects. Then I learned Agile. And in Agile, guess what? We still work for organizations that are still project-based. Some organizations are now grouping work under products, but a lot of organizations are still budgeting projects, right? So in Scrum, you still have projects being assigned to teams, or teams that pull from a group of projects to a portfolio. We also call projects initiatives, and that's some of the language that you guys are used to, right? Now, the difference is, now I'm a Scrum team, and I now have my work in a backlog. In that backlog, those of you that are familiar with Jira, we decompose projects into sort of like high level functional deliverables that we call epics. Everybody's familiar with epics? Okay, and I'm kind of aligning them. They're not 100% apples to apples the way that they're aligned, okay? But they're as close as you can get to the left side. But I have an initiative, and I'm going to decompose that initiative and the scope into high-level functional deliverables, right? That are usually customer-based, right? And those we call epics. So most of our backlogs have tickets called epics. Then those epics now are broken down into what we call user stories. Our beautiful user stories. How many of you love user stories? User stories are our life now, right? Right? So we're going to talk a little bit about user stories. And then the teams decompose the epics into user stories. And the user stories is what we bring into our sprints, right? And that's what we deliver in our sprints. Epics can be completed across multiple sprints. But the user stories, ideally, we want to complete within the sprint. But I've got my developers in my Scrum team. I've got my designer. I got my business analyst, right? I got my tester. And those folks, they decompose the user stories into what we call tasks or subtasks as well, right? Any questions there? I think everybody's pretty familiar with that. But some organizations are using frameworks such as SAFe. And guess what happens when they implement SAFe? Some of the language changes a little bit. I don't love it because it's a little confusing, but I wanted to kind of show you guys the alignment, right? So I don't know why, but SAFe decided to call their projects initiatives or their large bodies of work that are budgeted every year at the portfolio level, they decided to call them epics. Not too many organizations are using that. And even the organizations that are implementing SAFe, they're not using that terminology, but I have seen some that are. So I just kind of wanted to align it there for you guys. And then the functional deliverables that are being decomposed, that are being the functional solutions that are going across multiple sprints, they're calling them features. So here, what I'm going to be using the terminology features and epics from the Scrum side, sort of intertwined. Because for me, a feature and a Scrum epic is the same thing. Any questions on that? Is there anybody that's seen that for the first time? And then user stories are user stories. Thank God, we love them. They stay the same. And then the subtasks are the same. Okay. There is another type of deliverable definition that SAFe uses called PI objectives. For those of you that there's some of you that said that your organization was implementing some sort of SAFe PI planning. PI objectives are quarterly business outcomes, and they're usually tied to the features. So typically the features and the epics, I'm going to now mix them, okay? An epic in Scrum, a feature in SAFe, you want to prioritize them quarterly to be delivered within a quarter. That's typically how we prioritize that type of work. So then the teams prioritize the user stories, right, for the sprints within the quarter. But then there's something called the PI objective, which is the named business outcome that those features are going to deliver within the quarter. Anybody using PI objectives? Anybody using PI objectives in their organization?
Yes.
Oh, you guys are using PI objectives, Gabriel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're following, so we're in the middle of or we just started within the past year doing agile transformation within the company, and we're following SAFe, well, or our version of SAFe.
Okay. So I like what Marcelo put on the chat. I kind of define the PI objective that same way, Marcelo. So we have the sprint goals, right? I kind of, so you have a sprint goal every sprint. The PI objectives are sort of like your quarterly goals, which should be an accumulation of those sprint goals every sprint.
Yep.
That's great. Okay, awesome. All right. So I just wanted to do that high level setup there. And then the next exercise is, what type of information do you capture when you are in your backlog And we're going to stick to Scrum. I have the 2 words, features and epics, but for me, they're like, hey, I have an initiative, and now I have to decompose it into my high-level functional deliverables. What is the type of information that we gather when creating our epics tickets, our feature tickets in our backlog? And then if you guys can go back into the Jamboard, we are in frame number 3. Is that frame number 3, Nelu? Sorry, I can't see.
Correct. Yes, that's frame number 3.
Okay. What type of information do we capture in our backlog when creating the functional high-level deliverables that we're calling epics and features?
The question is what goes in the epic description?
Okay,
Is that
that's one of them.
what the
That's
question?
one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
I love it. Acceptance criteria, business outcomes, feature hypothesis. How does it benefit the customer? I'm excited to see acceptance criteria. You know why? Because not a lot of teams actually write acceptance criteria at the epic levels. Okay, long-term vision OKRs. Sizing. And I think Mayank said description. If you can put that there to Nelu, please.
I wanted to say description.
Oh.
No? Okay.
Okay, very good. So you guys are pretty familiar then with that. Okay, so that means my presentation is going to be a breeze because you guys already have most of it. I'm just going to show you some examples. I love it. You've got dependencies. Dependencies is one of the items that I have on there as well. And then yeah, ROI, high level tech design if needed. Yeah, especially if they're more technical epics. Great. Okay, very good. So you guys are experts. All right. So that means you're gonna have a lot of input to my next session. So let's I'm gonna share Nelu then.
Okay.
Let me, how do I do this? Okay. I'm not the expert here. And Nelu's gonna help me out.
Sure, I can share it.
No, I got it. Okay. So we talked about, hey, you know, what's a good way to prioritize? How many of you have heard about MVP? What does MVP stand for?
Minimum viable product.
Minimum viable product, right? And I love this little picture because this little picture is always kind of cool. So how not to build a minimum viable product, how also not to build it, and how to build a minimum viable product. So, you know, on the first example, hey, I want a 4-door car and I want it to look like a Beagle, right? Like a Beagle. I think that's the right, it's some sort of Beagle. What was the 1970s car? Oh my God, my brother had a little bug in the 1970s in his high school. What was that called?
Gremlin?
No, it was a VW.
Volkswagen.
The Herbie Love Bug. The Volkswagen bug.
Yeah, it was one of those. It was the Harvey Love Bug. That was my brother's first car.
Herbie the Love Bug. Yep.
It was so I want a Harvey the Love Bug. Okay, that's what I want. That's my final deliverable. And then I go to my team and I'm like, hey, get me a Harvey the Love Bug in 4 weeks, or actually in 2 weeks. And then the team comes in and they give me a wheel. Can I do anything with a wheel? Guys? Nope. No. Right? Then they give me something that looks like a skateboard. Is that close enough to my Harvey the Love Bug? No, I can't really sit in it and close the doors. Or they come back and they give me just the top of the car with no wheels, right? So this is kind of building it sort of waterfallish, right? At the end, they build it, but I can't really get anything sooner, right? Then in the second iteration, I'm like, okay, guys, I still want a Harvey the Love Bug. I have not changed my mind. That is really what I want. And they give me what looks like a scooter. I'm not a happy camper. Then they give me a bicycle, not a happy camper. Then they give me a motorcycle. I might get excited about the motorcycle, but I really want a Harvey the Love Bug, right? So it doesn't get me close enough that I can test out driving something that looks like Harvey the Love Bug, okay? So in the third iteration, they're like, okay, they give me something that I can actually sit in and drive. At least I can sit in the first one, and I have wheels, and it looks like it has some sort of engine. In the second one, okay, I can actually put some stuff in the back, but I'm still testing the engine, and I'm driving from point A to point B, and I'm giving them feedback. In the third one, wow, it's not Harvey the Love Bug, but it kind of looks like it. And I'm like, hey, that's a cute design, but I still want my Harvey the Love Bug look, you know, because I'm a big movie fan. And then they finally give that to me, right? So I love this slide because it's pretty simple, and it kind of shows what MVP is not. So we always say, hey, what can we give our customers at the end of the sprint that is testable and verifiable? That's really the rule of thumb, right? And we're going back to Agile basics here, right? So testable and verifiable, that they can give us feedback, and it's close enough to what the customer wants at the end. And so really think about that. Ask the customer, what can we build for you as an MVP that is close enough in these smaller chunks, right? Because you can't build everything at once, but that they can test and verify and give us feedback. It can help make our designs better. I hope that helps. I hope that helps. And we have to continuously ask that question, why? Because I remember when I used to do my big, large, multi-million-dollar projects that took 12 months to build, I remember having multiple experiences when at the end, when we build this beautiful product with all these, bells and whistles, that a lot of the functionality was actually not used. And I remember that. I went through a huge ServiceNow project where we designed all these ServiceNow modules, and at the end, I could tell you half of the functionality we built was not used by the customers. Okay, so the reason why we're now more agile and we prioritize more often and we want to get feedback more often from our customers is because of the experiences that we've had. Because a year later, the market can change. A year later, your customer can change their mind. And they don't always know what they want until we start creating something that they can test and verify, right? And that's the beauty about delivering incrementally and always asking, what is the MVP, okay? Now, I love this. I built this a couple of years back when I was at a different organization. I just thought it kind of was a simple way of explaining it. The minimum viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learnings about a customer with the least effort, right? MP, which is the minimum product, is decided by the developer. So remember, you're a team, you've got your product owner, your business stakeholders, you've got your developers, right? And the product owner says, hey, this is what's going to give us the most value, which we call the minimum value, right? But the team can come back and say, you know what? But this is what we can build for you the quickest, right? And it's always a conversation. It's always a negotiation. The product owner might say, hey, you know what? This whole thing gives me value, but if you give me that quick thing, I might be able to get some value out of that. So yeah, build that for me first. But we don't know until we ask, right? And we got to ask these questions every single sprint. Guess what? And the more often we do that, the more we educate our business stakeholders and our product owners. So MVP needs to be a combination of both, right? What can we get quicker? Focus on minimum I can do to get the next piece of work done. And then we need to look at the big picture. There are things we need to do first to identify problems. And let's find the lightweight techniques to help us define the problems. Does that make it simple to understand? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. You guys want to take a snapshot, feel free to doing that. That's a great way to kind of explain it. That has really worked for me. Okay. All right. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because we spent a lot of time talking. So here are some examples of how to write good features. but this is the same for your epics for Scrum teams, okay? So we've got a feature, okay, which is equivalent to our Scrum epics, right? Is a service that fulfills a stakeholder needs, right? It's a functionality. Each feature includes a benefit hypothesis and acceptance criteria. You guys were dead on when you added your stickies, when we asked the question. It is sized or split as necessary to be delivered by a single team or multiple teams, right? So we know that some of the larger functionalities that we have in our backlog, it's either going to be delivered by one team, but there are instances where they could be delivered by multiple teams. We want to provide as much information in those epics for our team. The more that we provide when we're doing the backlog refinement, when we're creating those epic tickets, the better information our team is going to have in order to decompose it into user stories. So the best practice is have a really good description. Always write the benefit. We can call it a benefit hypothesis, but it's the benefit for the customer. Acceptance criteria is highly recommended. And we'll talk a little bit about why and what that helps out with. And then any sizing, like how many sprints, keep the sizing simple. How many sprints is this going to take us, right? It all depends when you start decomposing into user stories, right? Some epics may take one sprint, some may take multiple sprints. So here are some examples. Now, there's the title of the ticket, and then there's the benefit, and then there's the acceptance criteria. The title, there's multiple ways of writing the title of your feature epic. I always recommend to start with a verb. I like to make it actionable. Some teams don't, but I always want to know if I am creating a new functionality, if I'm updating an existing functionality, if I'm enhancing something, if I'm building something. So starting it out with a verb is always a great practice that I recommend. And then after, because you're at the epic level, you want to keep that title pretty short, because remember, you're building your backlog. And when you list it out, you want to immediately see the list of your epics in your backlog. I'm going to speak Jira now, okay? Because that's the one that I'm the most familiar. When I look at my backlog and I look at my epics listed out on the left-hand side, right? I want to be able to very quickly know what the scope of that ticket is without having to open it. So the better you guys do at writing the title of that epic, the easier it's going to be for when you guys look at your backlog and you look at your epics to know what they're about. And then obviously you go into it and you write more of the description and the acceptance criteria. But any other ideas on the titles, guys?
No, that's the recommendation I always use.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it short, but
Yep.
give me the high level functionality, right?
Mhm.
But then I always recommend to start with a verb on that. Okay, awesome. So then here's some more examples, like in-service software update. They put the update at the end. I would say update in-service software, but I would name the type of software that it is on this one, right? And then there's the acceptance criteria. What is it that I want this functionality to deliver? Now I'm breaking that functionality down. Oh, I need nonstop routing to be available, automatic and manual update support, rollback capability, right? This is where we decompose it. I know of a lot of teams that don't do acceptance criteria at the epic level. They do it at the user story level, but it's really helpful. Guess what? If you do a good job at doing acceptance criteria in that epic ticket, guess what that decomposition helps you out with?
Writing your stories.
Exactly. Because now I may have a story on nonstop routing availability. My next story, manual update support, automatic manual update support. So the more time we take up front in these high-level epics, and we put a lot of really good information, it actually makes things easier for the team when they go write their user stories. Okay, awesome. All right, here's an example. Okay, this is an example of what one company is doing. Okay, I showed you guys the generic part. So because a lot of companies are still, project-based, and they have a lot of different projects, there might be a team that's working on 3 projects, right? So when they're actually writing the epics, they use like a naming convention that may refer to the project in the naming convention, and I'm talking about the title of the epic. So some organizations, they do the prefix and they put like an initial that is the project name. This is an example of an organization that has functionality for brands and channels. So the epics are very brand related and channel related, but they're for a specific project. So this is an example. They might do a prefix with the project name, right? The brand that the epic is going to be implementing and the different channels, and then the functionality. This is just an example here, right? So LRP is the project, TF and WFM are the brands, and then you've got the functionality that is being built. This is for the epic of that business, the title of the business epic. Then I may have a technical project, right? So because there's technical projects like CI/CD capabilities, so some organizations, they use the naming convention in their epics. Is anybody doing anything like this?
Yes. Yes.
Gabriel, you guys as well?
Yeah, so because we do projects within, because we're a hybrid, our company, we use a system called Delivery Hub to handle all the project demands, and they're entered in there. And then we use Jira for our agile sprints and all that stuff. So we, at our feature level, we prefix our feature title with the demand number that's in Delivery Hub to sort of link the two together. So it goes the demand number with the title, and we usually, well, I like to also have a verb in the front, but whatever the description is of that, or the title of that feature is. And then at the story level, we prefix the stories with the demand number and then the feature number and then the title of the story. So that way it's kind of linked that way, and from Jira into Delivery Hub.
Okay, wonderful. So it's whatever reporting, requirements the different companies have. So I'm glad to hear that, because I've seen this. It's not the best example, but it is easier for some companies to do it this way. I did want to say there's other fields in the ticket, like labels, right? That could also, you can input words that then you can select from, right? And you can filter from, okay, as well. So those are some examples that I wanted to share. But what is really important is what you guys put in the exercise. We want to make sure that we have a really good description. Okay, it's that information that is very valuable, because you're going to get a lot of questions from the team. So we got the title, right? But the description, start your statement, be very descriptive to the purpose of the functionality that the epic is gonna contain. Why are we doing this? For whom is it? Who's your target audience? What type of customer is it, right? You can even write it from the persona perspective, right? And who are the different types of personas that are going to benefit from this? The benefit is super important. And I put a sticky here. I had a color on it, but include metrics. I think some of you had put, hey, describe the expected benefit to the end user or even the business, and how those will be measured. So OKRs, this functionality is going to benefit your customers in what way, right? Do we have metrics that we can then look for and do these value exercises once the functionality has been implemented, right? So is it going to increase revenue, ROI? Is it going to decrease some sort of usage or downtime or timing of access to a website? Those are the type of questions that we want our product owners and our business to provide for us, because that makes what the teams are building more business driven, right? And so this is where the business outcomes are really, really important. And these are functional business epics that we want to make sure that we have some sort of business outcome associated. Why? Because many of you have to present this to the business and to leadership, right? And to be able to articulate the business outcomes of the functionalities that our agile teams are delivering is very important, very, very important. Acceptance criteria, as we mentioned before, captures the criteria that indicates the definition of done, right? But we said, what does that help out with? With building amazing user stories, okay? Here's a little bit of more. I'm going to move a little bit forward, okay, just for the sake of time, because we've got this is just, again, more examples on the description. Some organizations in the description, they actually use a little bit of the user story format. You know, they write the persona, I want to, so that, and they kind of write the description this way. That's also recommended. I wanted to show that to you guys. And then here's an example. Here's an example. Here's an example. So you've got the summary is the title. You've got the description. They're using the user story format. You've got the benefit, and then you have the acceptance criteria. This is a pretty large feature that most likely will go across multiple sprints. Okay. Now, just high level, I'm gonna kind of come over here. I think most of you are familiar with user stories, right? Most of you are familiar with user stories and the user story format.
Yes.
Yes.
This is pretty basic, right? But one of the questions that you guys had was like, hey, when do we split user stories? So I believe, Neilu, we have this document available in a PDF that we can share with the participants.
Yes, we can, and I'm sharing it right now.
Okay, this is something that I want to share with you guys. It's just a nice little document that kind of gives you some triggers and rules of thumb to when to split very large stories and some techniques on how to do that. I'm going to go over some of these pretty quickly, but you guys can hopefully put this on the chat, and you guys can download it and take it with you, review it with more time, because we're not going to be able to cover all of this right in this session, but hopefully this could help you guys out.
I have a question around that. This question.
Mm-hmm.
I read somewhere a long time back that a best story is a story which cannot be break it down any further. So it does it not answer this question? I mean, if that is the right thing to do it, like when the story cannot be break it down, just break it down as much as you can, like, you know, and that is your story. That's the perfect story.
I like it. I like it. I like it. And there's multiple stories that you guys could deliver in a sprint, but some teams like to break it down even further. But I like that it cannot be broken down any further. That's a good one. Here's an easy one, okay? From what I'm hearing, you guys are doing a good practice in writing your user stories acceptance criteria, okay? Here's a rule of thumb. If when your team is writing the acceptance criteria of a user story, right? It's your product owner, your business analyst. I always say, hey, my QA testers make my acceptance criteria better. I always want them to contribute to that, but even my developers as well. What happens when my one user story has 20 lines of acceptance criteria? What does that tell you? My one user story has 20 lines. Huh?
The story is too big.
Exactly.
That can be split, yep.
That can be split. So, because remember, your acceptance criteria is more like the detailed requirements of what we have to build in that user story. So that's a trigger. And I'm going to quickly just touch on the triggers, right? So if by just eyeing it, you look at that user story ticket and I have 20 acceptance criteria, that's a conversation, Scrum Masters. Hey team, hey, let's split this user story up. Okay, that's one of them. That's an easy one. That's a quick win. So acceptance criteria is one of them. That's in the document. Then there's all these other things to take into consideration. There's other techniques, other triggers, right? So what happens if I say, as a user, I want to do this and that so that I can gain this benefit? What happens if I have the words and or in my user story?
You gotta split it.
You gotta split it, because that means that I'm saying, as a user, I want to do this and that. That's two pieces of functionality that perhaps we can split into two separate user stories. That's a quick one. Another one is substitute one for all. So for example, there's functionalities that we can, that is multiple, that we can kind of make more specific. So to your point, Mayank, like, you know, how can you get to the story that you cannot split it anymore? That's one trigger. And then focus on a particular role or persona. So when we say as a user, sometimes we use the word customer. That is so broad. You really want to pin down your user stories to be more specific on your target audience. What type of customer? Oh, I have, I mean, we, in the company that I'm with, we use a lot of brands. So Straight Talk Multiline, TrackPhone, Walmart, right? Like, be more specific, be more specific. And the reason why we ask you guys to be more specific is because it's a great opportunity to ask your product owner, hey, you want us to build this for all these 10 different types of users. Customers, it's actually going to include 10 different types of users. And that scope may be too large. So if you list out and you're more specific on the types of users, then that helps the product owner say, no, let's prioritize it because this type of user is the one that's going to give us the biggest ROI. That's another great conversation to have, okay? Then there's these techniques, workflow steps, business rule variations, simple, complex variations in data methods, operations, use case scenarios, and then there's research, I have a couple of slides on these, but I know we're you know, we don't have too much time. Let me ask, which one of these do you guys want to see examples of? Which one of these would you like to learn more about?
Break out a spike.
Break out a spike. Okay, so break out a spike is doing research, right? Let me see if I have a slide on that, because here's the workflow steps. Okay, here's a business rules variations, and now we're talking about more of your technical requirements. Major effort, right? And splitting things up from that perspective. Simple, complex, variations in data, data methods, system qualities. Oh, I love this one. Have you guys heard of CRUD? Have you guys heard of CRUD? Create, read, update, and delete.
Yes.
That's another great way to split your stories, right? Because it's a different functionality that I'm creating. I don't think I have one on spikes, but a spike is a research, right? And sometimes, you know, I always recommend we want to allocate as much, whatever the team is doing should be in the backlog. We don't want work happening outside the team that is not accounted for in the backlog. So sometimes the team has to do some research, and some teams create a spike user story. That's what that is, Jenny. And it's for work that's coming down the pipeline. Okay. Sometimes they're talking about that in backlog refinement, which is great because some solutioning happens there. But some developers might actually have to go and do some research, and they create a spike user story.
What some of my teams have done before is, like, when there's a big feature that's a brand new feature that the company is trying to do, we've done proof of concepts prior, so kind of like a spike, but a little bit more to kind of prove that we'll be able to do what we're planning on doing, you know, before we actually do it. So it kind of helps that.
There's another one of the product owner that I worked with. He actually went to a conference and attended workshops to learn more, to be able to share with the team about the spike.
Nice.
Because it was pretty large.
Okay, very good. That kind of leads to, hey, what type of story is a spike? We have spikes under what we call technical stories. All right. This is a little bit, I don't know if anybody had a sticky like that, but technical stories are stories that our teams write that are more technical in nature, right? So these are the different types of technical deliverables like exploration, architectural work, infrastructure work, even compliance, refactoring, and then spikes is included in here. Okay, now we want to make sure that our stories are vertical. We want to make sure that our business user stories are vertical, right? So you've got that epic, you've got that functional epic that is going to deliver a functionality for your customers, and then you're going to decompose that work into user stories. You want to make sure that I would say all of your technical work is inside that story so that that story is vertical. But there is some separate work like architectural work or infrastructure work or maybe research that happens in a silo on its own that then you would say, okay, I would have a technical user story.
What do you mean by vertical?
Vertical meaning that that user story, right, has all the components of the software development lifecycle, analysis, design, testing, analysis, design, development, and testing. So it could be testable and verifiable, the one user story at the end of the sprint. That's what we mean by vertical.
Can I offer another way to think about that as well, to add?
Yes, please.
I would simply say, especially if you have technical teams and engineers who think horizontally, it is your front end API and back end, a little sliver of that, because they will take the front end component, deliver it, but you can't even use it because it's not connected to your back end with an API. So vertical would be getting a slice of that going straight down, that you're touching all of those layers.
Got it. So if like at the UI, you're adding a field, that field needs to be integrated. And so you get the data goes through and okay. So you're
Touch all
able to test
components of
that
it.
field. Got it.
And that's what
Thank
we
you.
say at the end of the sprint. We want your user stories to be testable and verifiable. And in order to do that, you got to go through that whole life cycle.
Yep. So hit all those layers.
In small slivers, in small slivers.
Yep.
I love it. All right, guys. So I got 5 minutes. I got one more question, Elu, in the Jamboard. You guys have done a great job. I had a lot more material, but we ran a little bit out of time. But hopefully you guys learned a lot. Let's see, Nate, what's our last question in our Jamboard? And we want to take a picture. We want to take a picture. Let's see if you can share the Jamboard. I think it's the last one at the end.
So is this one?
No, it's the one of the continuous improvement.
Okay.
You got to go the opposite direction.
Oh.
It's the last exercise I think you had.
Oh, sorry.
Keep going. Keep going.
Nope, that's not here. That's not it.
Yeah, you had it.
Oh, sorry. The slides. My apologies.
Oh, yeah. It's in the slides. Sorry. Okay, guys. So one of the questions we asked at the beginning is like, hey, why do you come to these meetups, right? And I want to keep that continuous improvement mindset going. So how can you continue to foster a relentless improvement mindset? Because you come here for a reason. You come here to learn. We got 29 people in here, and I am so humbled and appreciative that you guys have come here to learn. Hopefully, you learned some. And I actually learned from a lot of you because a lot of you gave some really great examples. But if you can put in the chat, or if anybody wants to share, how can you personally continue to foster your own relentless improvement mindset? Who wants to share?
I use a Jira board to track my progress in learning different agile methodologies, and I'm going to go back and review and revise all of my epics so that it's using different language structures.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome, Kara. Great.
I really like this.
Go ahead, Mariana.
I really like the slide that you shared where you compared traditional waterfall, project management, Scrum, and SAFe. Really, I didn't even think about structuring it that way. It created will make it easier for me actually as an Agile coach to present that to my teams. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I usually write it out, but my Surface Pro pen wasn't working. It wasn't working.
Yeah, I like that too. That was a very different approach to look at these 3 different methodologies. So thank you for showing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. And then Nilu, I think we have a Zoom user. That might be somebody that you need to